Okay, perfect. Okay. Oh, how Greg? Yeah. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Gregory. Hi, Bruno.
Hi guys. So yeah, Greg just joined the call, so now we could start so that the event goes very well.
All right, perfect. So, thanks, Ivich. Thanks, Bruno. Hi, Greg.
Hello, how are you guys doing? It's nice to meet you.
Right, it's good to meet. Thanks for joining this time. We just scheduled to have this 5 minutes conversation, so we'll be able to bond best and then have a very smooth event. Eke is on the call. Eke is the your fellow panelist on the call. So
Okay.
yeah.
Hi,
So
okay, how you doing?
He said, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm great, man. It's nice to meet you. Thank you guys for being on the call. And
Connect with you.
yeah, all good. And thanks for being on the call. And right on. I'm excited.
Same here. Same here.
that's perfect. So basically, just to explain that the sequence of the conversation, the panel will be like a conversation where, So the theme of the panel is science of investment readiness, focus on Nigerian startups. Of course, Greg is the founder of startupscience.io. So, it makes for a very smooth conversation, and Eke has done powerful stuff representing Nigeria and Africa very well. So, it's basically a conversation, not necessarily a question and answer session, though I'll also be chipping in questions, to direct the conversation flow. But however, if you pick one component of the investment readiness that startups should know of, and then while you discuss it, Eke would then also share his nuggets or insights on the same point, then particularize it to what Nigerian startups should know, how it could benefit Nigerian startups. But of course, I'm not here to direct my teachers or tutors on this stuff. Well, we've done great stuff. I'm not here to tell you how the conversation should be. We are basically here. I'm part of the students, and I basically be an audience for this conversation because I'm also here to learn. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. Can I ask you how I say your name? I'm so sorry. I don't know how to pronounce it.
My name is Udoka, but you can call me Riches. My English name is Riches.
Riches.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right. EK, that one's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's pronounced AK, like the gun. AK-47.
Yeah, that's easy, right?
Yeah, that's super easy.
Kuda. Uduka.
Udoka.
Udoka.
Aduka.
Udoka.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Udoka. There you go.
I just spent 2 weeks in Sweden, and I was just learning how to say their names. I got to tell you, I don't know if you've ever tried to pronounce a Swedish name, but it is very hard.
Tricky.
They're like, one name is like this long. It's crazy. Yeah. I'm excited to do this with you guys, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. And Bruno, thank you for setting this up. Really appreciate it.
You are welcome, Greg. We have
Thank
been
you so
talking
much.
this podcast for some time, and finally the date came, so we are ready to do it.
Good.
And Greg, you're so up until the conversation. I was talking with Udoka about the ecosystem in Enugu, and that was how he told me about Startup Grind the first time. And when I then Googled and I started reading up on it, I'm like, whoa, this is insane, right? Because I don't think I've shared this with him, but my own back of the envelope calculation is that in the southeast where Startup Enugu is based, in that entire region, for us to double the GDP over the next 10 years, we need to grow about 3,000 companies, 3,000 startups that can employ at least 100 people, right? Over a 10-year period. So, and I'm like, you've done this, and I know how hard it is to do one startup or do two, and then I've seen people have done this multiple times. You've done like 12.
Yeah.
And then you've contributed at an ecosystem level, like, I came in with a whole lot of questions around how that is, because like I'm graying and it's like 2 startups. So I'm like, how do you do it for 12 times, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, my first one, I was 19, and I started, and it was a bank, and I sold that a couple years later, and then I did environmental applied biotechnology, and that I sold to a public company in Canada after 3 years. And then when the internet came out, and I learned how to code, then everything was internet based, everything was tech based. Because it's like, if you think about how amazing it is that you have an idea, right? And it's just an idea, a vapor. And then you turn this into a business, and then somebody buys that from you for like millions of dollars. That is the most epic, amazing thing that you can ever feel. And so all the pain and suffering that you go through, and there's a lot, right? I mean, anybody that's on this call that has done a startup, I mean, it's hard, right? I mean, it's really, really hard. And when you go through all that pain and suffering, and at the end of it, you get to the point where you sell something and you see the money come in, you all of a sudden think it's worth it, and you forget how hard it was. And you forget it, right? And then that's why I keep doing it, I think, because I forget how hard it is, and then I just keep doing another one. And another one.
I can totally understand. Amazing. Thanks for sharing that.
Right. So I just officially kickstart the conversation, and then we just dive right straight into it. Very, very good to see 2 speakers bond real good. It's just an opening for an exciting evening. So hey, hi everyone. Good to have everyone on this call. It's very elating for me, and I feel quite excited to have 2 great speakers, and of course having Greg, who is, as far as the startup world is concerned, is one of the champions we have globally. So I just dive right straight into this introduction and say, if Chisholm will help share her screen, so just discuss, do the introduction. So Greg is a Fulbright scholar, TEDx speaker, and an award, of course, clearly an award-winning entrepreneur with 12 exits. Wow. Including a $925 million cross-border deal with eBay. I'd like to learn a bit more about that. And then eBay marketing solutions here. So he's the author of The Startup's Life Cycle, of course, the founder of StartupScience.io, and recipient of the World of Difference Award. Basically from humble beginnings. It's very, very notable to share that he came from humble beginnings, and he has been shaped by from humble beginnings and shaped by 7 neurodivergent conditions. Greg is a self-taught, mission-driven figure. His talks blend science, strategy, and story to help founders build what matters against all odds. And so, Greg, it's good to have you on this call. Thanks for joining us and being with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all the people that are listening and watching. Thank you so much. I'm humbled by you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, this panel is recorded. I'll be shared on Startup Grind's YouTube channel, which has a massive global audience. So it's even going to reach more persons, and we are very excited to to be on this course to share huge insights from very, 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 very experienced founders. So yes, Eke Urum is the founder of Risevest, a fintech company that operates Rise, a US-based dollar investment platform. HISA, a brokerage platform offering access to global stocks, options, and ETFs, and Asset-Based, a tokenized platform for private assets. So Risevest operates across Nigeria, Kenya, the US, and several other countries all over the globe. So yes, he's one of the champions. I call him one of the champions that Nigeria has in the Nigeria has as regards the startup world. Eke, it's good to have you. Thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you so much. I'm very flattered. I appreciate it. I'm not gonna undersell myself by saying I'm not a champion yet, but I'll say that I'm grateful that you guys thought I should be there. And Greg, I have my notebook because I'm not just an analyst. I'm also here to learn, right? But yeah, also contribute some perspective. So thanks, guys. I'm great to be here.
All right. Okay. So basically the theme for this panel session is the science of investment readiness. The discussion will focus on Nigerian startups. So we're all here to learn. Greg, over to you to probably start off with some components for investment readiness as it concerns being a startup.
Yeah, I would say so. In my career, to give you an idea and context of where I come from, so I've done the 12 transactions of my own companies, but I've done another, I think I've done 20 altogether, including the companies that I invested in and have exited as well. And so in that, 35-year period of time and 20 different transactions, I've learned a lot, a lot about getting ready for talking to investors, what investors want and what they really care about and how to address it. So one of the things I would say, and I tell this to every time I do a talk, which I think is really important, is investors are always looking for three primary things up front. There's just three things that you can count on it, even if they don't say it. And what those three things are is first, why me? So why should I be the person to do this business? Why this? Meaning, why is this the business that we should be investing in? And why now? Why is now the best time to do this, right? So when you break that down, you see, we'll start with why now. You have to they're looking for either what's called a headwind or a tailwind, right? So something that is pushing you along in your favor or something that is against you, right? So when you think about that and you think about a disruption, a lot of people talk about, a disruption. And so to give you my view of a disruption, and then I'll reel back to what I was saying, I want you to imagine a still pond, like a still lake with no movement. It's just still. Usually those things, they have a lot of debris at the bottom, a lot of sediment, right? And when you throw a rock in the pond, you see the rings that appear on the outside of that pond, and then it stirs up all of the sediment. When you do a disruption, it's like you're throwing a rock into a still pond, which is an old market that is ripe for disruption. And then you see all that sediment that stirs up, right? These are all of the companies that you're disrupting. When you see those original rings that appear, those rings are opportunities. The first opportunities are the very beginning of the ring, which is a really small circle, right? So those opportunities are the biggest, but there's not very many of them. So when you think about that, now as the rings start to move to the outside, there's more opportunities, but they may not be as big, but there's also less competition. So when you're talking to investors and they're thinking about why now, what they're trying to understand is, do you have a headwind? Do you have a tailwind? Do you have competitors? And if you don't have competitors, how can they understand whether or not this is a good time to do the business? So the why now also means, are you disrupting something? Meaning you have to teach your customers about your business because it didn't exist before. Or are you entering a market where you're building a business where people already know what you have and you're building something better or something a little different? So the why now question is critical to, from an investor perspective, like, why is this a good time to do it? Because as we know, market conditions happen. Like in the United States, we have a terrible president right now. So, we have and first, let me also apologize for our president because he's just awful. Not my president. Okay. I used to work for Barack Obama. So that's my president. So, if you think about the the market, you have political turbulence. You can have things like COVID that come in after COVID. You can have things like recessions or inflation or war. There's so many things that can come out. So understanding the timing and why this is a good time to do the business is critical to make sure that the investors understand. And then the why is this business a good thing? And the why me is the other side. So if you think about this, when investors are looking at businesses outside of the why now, it's always the horse and the jockey, right? So the horse is the business and the jockey is the entrepreneur, right? You can have a really good horse and a bad jockey and still fail, or you can have a really great jockey and a good horse and succeed, or the other way around, right? So the other thing they're looking for is why me means, why am I the right person to do this? When you think about that, there are two types of entrepreneurs. There's a subject matter expert, and subject matter experts think from the inside out. So this is like an engineer or somebody that works somewhere and they found a problem that many people are experiencing, and then they go after that problem. That's a subject matter expert entrepreneur. And so they think from the inside out. And then you have a visionary entrepreneur. And a visionary entrepreneur thinks from the outside in, so they're opposite of each other, right? So Steve Jobs is a visionary entrepreneur, but Wozniak was a inside entrepreneur, so a subject matter expert entrepreneur. And that's why the two of them worked really well together, right? So you see this with Apple, you see this with Amazon, you see this with Microsoft, and most big companies. There's always two people, a visionary and a subject matter expert. That doesn't mean that you need both of them, but that's what they mean when they say, why me? Like, why am I the guy? Do I have a special expertise? Do I see the world differently? Do I have some sort of vision? You know what I mean? Like, do I have grit? Do I have the strength to power through when things get really hard? Whenever I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'm like, it's really important that the investor understands that you are strong enough to fight the fight, to get through the obstacles and the grind that is doing a startup. It's not for everybody. In fact, when you look at the failure rates, you have a huge percentage. It's like 18% of founders that just give up. So investors want to make sure that you're going to stay in the game, that you're going to keep fighting and keep moving through it. So you need to tell them something about you that makes them believe that you're tough enough to get through the fight. So what I use is, I grew up poor. We didn't have any money. We had tents. My family's all adopted. My siblings are all different nationalities across the board. And I grew up in a pretty hard life at a young age. And I had to start working when I was 13 and all this kind of stuff. And so when I tell them this story, it tells them that I know how to struggle, that I know how to deal with obstacles, and that I'm not going to give up. I'm like a dog with a bone, just will not give up. So you have the why this, which is left, which is the business that you have itself. And that is tandem. They're all linked together, right? Yeah. With the why now, right? Because is this business something that's unique and useful right now? Do you have a headwind or a tailwind with the particular business that you're going after? So what I tell everybody is, why this, why me, why now? Understand those things and convince the investor that you know what those three things are, and you will have a much better chance of raising capital. I'm sorry that took so long, AK. I'm sorry.
No, I was locked in the whole time. It makes perfect sense. I was 100% locked
in. Right. So, like I said, I'm just here to listen and learn too. So, right, AK, if you'd like to just, touch base on that, the three components you mentioned as it concerns Nigerian startups, and then to see what more light Greg can also, throw on that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think what he says really applies to startups everywhere, right? In fact, there's a Medium post that I was working on based on conversations I've had, where talking to the tech conference we had, I met a lot of founders, and this echoes the conversation I was having with them, which is I see a handful of people who are coming in to pitch companies that they don't have any real depth in terms of expertise, and they don't also have any real vision. Being a visionary sounds, again, to most of us, maybe sounds very big picture. But I think it's really, if you notice the people who are considered visionary, they have very strong opinions. And those opinions sometimes can be very unconventional, right? So if you're doing something and I don't see, like, where's the strongest insights? Like, so someone, just to give an example, someone asked me, so we got on a call and they were telling me, well, should I do this or should I do this? Should I take this approach? So they were trying to build something around payments, and they were like, well, everyone is paying this like extra fees when, like, if you're using Paystack or a Flutter Wave. So I'm trying to build something that doesn't require you to pay any fees. Do you think that that's the right? And I was like, why are you asking me? Like, if you're asking me to tell you if that idea is the right one, then you should not be doing this, right? Because you have to have an opinion that you are so strong, so clear on, so you have so much insight that nobody else knows what to do better than you. That's what makes you the right jockey, right? Like using Boring's analogy. So I've had investors tell me, "Oh, this thing you're doing this way, why don't you add this layer to it or build it in this fashion?" And I'm like, I see the point of what you're saying. Maybe even that would be a bigger company than what I'm building, but it will not be my company. I know the company I'm trying to build, and that vision is super clear to me. So I know why that is not the right answer. Even if you're telling me that if I do this now, you're gonna invest in me. For me, I know the vision of what I'm trying to achieve, and therefore, it's like I'm gonna find the investors that match that vision. So I think that's the only area that I'll add more clarity. As a founder, you really, really need to understand what you're doing and why, because that's the conviction that will allow you to build, even when everybody else is saying they don't get it or it's not going to work. But this is what I'm doing, and that's that it's going to work. That's what makes you the right person, right? And then the other aspects of it, I think, is very spot on. Thank you.
I think, AK, I agree with you 100%. I think that it's really important that you have confidence and certainty in what you're building, because let's face it, right? If you have to be sold yourself first before you're going to sell anybody else. If you're not sold, you're not going to be able to sell it to anybody else. Like, that's just full stop, right? Like, that's just how it works. And I think that also, when you think about other things that are investor readiness, besides why this, why me, why now, is also, what is your exit strategy? So investors don't get their money back until you sell your business, right? That's when they get their money back. When I did research, I did 5 years of research on founder failure and founder success. What I found is that the majority of the founders did not have in their pitch decks or in any conversations with an investor what their exit strategy is. Who they're going to sell to, why that person would be interested in buying the company, and how long it's going to take, and what they think they're going to sell the company for. And the reason why this is so important is because companies buy other companies for only one of two reasons. They either buy the company because they want to grow revenue, or they buy the company because they want to save money. That's it. There's just two reasons. The majority of the acquisitions that are out there are the acquisitions where they want to grow revenue. And the way that they grow that revenue is by increasing the lifetime value of a customer. So when you think about, we call it LTV, lifetime value. What that means is however much money that the customers are going to spend, a certain customer is going to spend with you over the period of time that customer is your customer. So let's say that it's a 16-year-old and they're going to be doing business with you until they're 20. Then that gives you the time frame. and then you say, how much are they going to be spending? And let's say it's 100 a month. Then now you have the time frame and the money, you add them together, that's lifetime value. So the other side to the equation is the customer acquisition cost, meaning how much does it cost you to get a customer, right? The two of those things creates a ratio, which is if I spend $1, I make, or if I spend one of whatever currency, then I make, 3, right? A 3x return. And they're looking for a minimum of like 4, 5, 6, like in that neighborhood. So going back to the acquisition, when a company buys another company to make money, what they're trying to do is increase that lifetime value by selling other products to the customers that they've already paid for with that customer acquisition cost, right? So they increase how much the customer pays, which decreases the amount of money they're spending for those customers. But most of the time, those big companies have already paid for those customers. So if they buy your product and sell your product to those customers, they increase the lifetime value and then pay for the cost of your business. Does that make sense? So what a lot of people do is they don't plan this, right? So they don't plan it up front. Now, this is a problem, and I'll tell you why. There's two really big reasons. One reason is because if you look at why founders fail in the last 5 years, usually it's because the company was overvalued, meaning they thought their company was worth more than it was worth. And how do you know that? Because if your acquirer is paying 20 million for a company and you're asking for 40, you're not going to be able to sell your company. And that's an overvaluation issue that you have to deal with from the very beginning. You can't wait until your company's valued at 40, but you can only sell it for 20. You have to plan that from the very beginning, because every time you do funding rounds, your valuation goes up. So it means you have to understand that from the very beginning. Does that make sense?
Yes.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. So the other side of it is the customer that you have and the customer that your acquirer has to be the same customer. Otherwise, they can't get that lifetime value, right? And if you do that, if you don't do that, it's not like you can get 5 years into it and then all of a sudden change all your customers, right? Because you've already spent money, you've already built your customers. So if you don't plan for the exit in advance, meaning who is going to buy my company and how much are they paying for companies and who are their customers, then you could build your company, get all the way to the end and be successful and still fail. You see what I mean? So that's like another thing in terms of investor readiness. The investors want to understand that the path to get them their money back. See what I mean?
Okay. So I just wanted to ask, thanks for the insight so far. I wanted to ask just 2 questions that probably would be, I should have even asked before we dive into the conversation. So I have 2 questions for Eke. I have 2 questions for you, Greg. So first question would be, what inspired you creating? I believe strongly that you probably have exited 12, had this 12 exit before you created startupscience.io. So just wanted to know what inspired it first. And this question leads to my second question.
Honestly, I needed money. I mean, my family was poor and I wasn't, I'm not an academic person, so I didn't do very good in school and we didn't have any money to pay for school. And so I needed to try to help my family, right? I wanted to help pay for food and, rent and clothes and stuff like that. And the only way I could do that was by starting businesses. And then it just so happens I was pretty good at it, but it's pretty much, honestly, it's pretty much because I was just trying to stay off the streets, Yeah.
Yeah. So no, my question was the startupscience.io.
Yeah. Oh, what made me start Startup Science?
Yes, correct.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I apologize.
The first one was still great too.
Yes.
I like that part. But yeah, the Startup Science one, yeah, absolutely.
So when I finished, after I sold a couple companies to eBay and I was the chief strategy officer for eBay and then the chief technology officer, I hated working at eBay, so I quit and I went into politics under the Obama administration. And I got to meet Obama like 2 times. By the way, like, he is the coolest guy you've ever met in your whole life, like the coolest guy. Anyway, sorry, I got off track. I love he gave me a hug. I mean, the guy's amazing. So what I was trying to do when I went into politics is move money down to startups, because I believe that the path to evolve our world is through startups. The path for people to get out of check to check living and wealth equality is through startups. And I think that the solutions to a lot of our problems are startups, because let's face it, startups work on solving problems. And so I thought if I was going to try to give back, the best possible way I could give back is to try to go to politics and get more money moved down. But they turned me down. And it was really hard to be turned down, because I spent 5 years on it and then they just said no. And so I said, instead of doing it from the top down, I would build something from the bottom up. And I wanted to build a platform that could be utilized and founders could log into, that takes the entire ecosystem and puts it into one place. So instead of them having to log in here and all these different places for mentors and investors and grants and, debt financing and, perks, incentives from software companies, etc., that the whole thing was in one place. And therefore creating an environment that a founder could come into and do it extremely affordable, right? So make it so that most people, hopefully everybody, can afford it, and then solve the problem by empowering founders, by helping founders succeed. And that's my mission in life right now. It's to try to change the world through entrepreneurship and democratize the concept of building a company. That's why I started Startup Science.
Well, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay. So you see, now I'm pretty sure you've never been to Nigeria. I don't know, but I feel you've never been to Nigeria. I'm not even sure you've been to any African country. Now, having not gone to this area of the world yet, but probably have heard a few things from these axis. I'm not sure the news you've heard, whether positive or negative, but what do you think? So good thing I'm speaking, why I'm asking this question, because being a global, having gotten success at the highest which you've gotten, which around the globe, that is huge success.
Mm-hmm.
And also being interested in helping startups founders, even in our community, we have very, very early stage founders, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would be the best? So I know you've given us components for development readiness, but then having not been here, encountered here, what would stand out for an African founder or startup that will make you to feel like, maybe I'll just consider investing in a few African startups or Nigerian startups? What will stand out to capture your attention?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things. The first thing to realize is that Africa, so the southern continent of Africa, right? All the countries in the southern continent, except for South Africa, all the countries on the west coast, the center, and the east coast of Africa are in a renaissance. They are becoming something. If you look at a lot of the other countries, most of the ideas have been taken. So it's harder for founders to find things, right? There's a lot of competition. But Africa is unique in that I personally believe that the continent of Africa will be one of the most powerful continents in the world in the next 10 years. And the reason why is because if you look at countries like Europe, they're old countries that had to rebuild multiple times and go through changes to try to get to the new world, right? And the United States is younger. We had less changes. Africa, they're just skipping over all that, right? So the African countries are going right from, where you were to the most modern things, skipping over all of that. So you have transformation. You don't have to deal with the transformation, right? which means that that ring I was talking about, when you get a drop and then you see the rings coming on, that's like rain falling in a pond in Africa. They're all over the place, right? And they're happening in an exponential way. I think the biggest problem Africa has is it doesn't have enough founders. I think Africa needs way more founders. Probably.
I 100% agree. But
yeah.
Please finish your.
Yeah. Like there is, if I was in politics in Africa, I would be focusing on getting, there should be way more accelerators, way more incubators. There should be way more programs. This continent and its countries represent one of the greatest opportunities the planet has ever seen. That's
yes. Sorry, please go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. So this, Gregory, what you said, it's incredibly accurate and incredibly insightful. And I'll tell you, I wish, maybe I'll share my screen, but maybe not now, because I have like 1 million tabs open. But I was writing a Medium post, right? And again, Udoka is laughing because he knows where I'm coming from with this. My company did a partnership. We co-sponsored a tech conference in Enugu earlier this year. And what I basically told them at the Udoka, you were there, right? Did you listen to when I spoke? Do you remember?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, what I told them.
Oh no, I was yeah.
Yeah, I told them that, listen, you guys are talking about how to build a great ecosystem. And I saw a huge room full of people that were very hungry to build solutions. And I was like, what you need are the enablers, right? You need founders. I said great ecosystems are built around great founders and their enablers, right? So the enablers are the ecosystems, the accelerators, the VCs. So yeah, Victor just said.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
So someone that was there was mentioning that he was there, but I'm like, you don't have enough founders, and the founders that are there do not have enough support. And I was also telling the commissioner, so the state official that helped put that conference together, that if I were in their shoes, and I even volunteered. I'm working on the proposal now, because I told them what you should do is just find even the money you're using to put this conference together, right? You can scale it down a little bit, find like 10 great founders and just give them this money. It'll do a lot more for you over time, right? But I even told them that, why don't we set up a fund where the government puts in about 10% of it. We in the private sector, talking to as many people, I told them I'll talk to as many people as we need to get the rest of the funds in, because then all we have to do is identify great founders, fund them, help them to go from 0 to 100 over however long it takes them, right? Because the opportunity is incredible. The amount of things that need to be built is incredible. And besides that, there's also like again, I know this is maybe very much off a tangent. Sorry. This is very much off a tangent in a little bit, but I remember when I told you that I think that over the next 10 years, what we need to do is figure out how to create about 3,000 startups, right? Because there's so many ideas, but what I've found is that some of the people who want to work on these ideas, they don't have the right exposure. And the talent gaps are amazing. You see people who are so I met so many people. You're working on really incredible stuff. You're very, very good at coding, but you're building something that just doesn't solve a real problem. You're just building because you think, you know what, this would be nice, right? And I'm like, that's a great place to start. But man, I wish someone could point you in the right direction and say, hey, think about this problem. So like what Y Combinator does, where they say, hey, we need founders in these areas. We need people building in these sectors, and then we're going to fund them, right? So we need more accelerators. We need more talent developers. One of the ways that we started solving this problem is we created an academy to train startup developers. And then I joined their community, and we're working on expanding that academy. We just registered a company called Talent Factory, because what we said is, fine, our job is to identify the right people, help them understand how the context of what you should build, and then hopefully, if we can find the right investors or the right partners, then we can maybe get them, match them with funding. So Lagos State government just announced something recently where they're going to do a 30 billion naira fund, which roughly is about, say 3 million to, I don't know, 30 million dollars maybe,
Yeah, about
to
$20 million.
yeah, to invest in startup founders. And I was super excited when I saw that. I took that news and I forwarded it to the same official I was talking. I'm like, this is what you guys should be doing. So basically, I'm with you on the fact that there's not enough founders. There's so much opportunity. I was joking with my wife yesterday. I wish I can clone myself, because there's so many things to be done and not enough people doing them. That, and capital will find the right people, but it's the right founders to go after all these opportunities. And that's, again, Udoka, that's why I joined this conversation. That's why I joined the community. That's what we are also trying to figure out. How can we achieve it within our ecosystem? So I guess that's enough rambling for now. Thanks.
I think I just like to put a layer on that, because you bring up something really powerful. There's a startup every 10 seconds, right? So there's about 50 million startups every year, and it's a $7 trillion US dollar market, right? It's a gigantic market. And in countries in the countries that are in Africa, what you see is that the majority of those startups are coming out of these newer markets because there's just so many opportunities. And then you see AI coming in, right? And AI is displacing a lot of people. Those people are starting businesses using AI because it's easier to start a business using AI. So you have a more exponential growth happening. And then if you look at University World News, did a report, and their report said that 33%, so a third of people that were going after advanced degrees at university have left universities and started companies. So you see an overall complete change in the way that the world is thinking. And the world is thinking more towards, let's do innovation than let's think in the old way, right? Like it's a fundamental shift in the way things are operating. And when you think about, dealing with investors and raising capital from investors and getting close to investors, you have to understand that there's going to be a lot of people trying to raise money from those investors because of what I just said. So differentiating yourself from that group of people is a big, that's a really, really important thing to make sure that you focus in on. And some of the ways to do that is to show them that you understand the life cycle of a startup, that you have the durability to get through the grind, and that your idea is an idea that is different, or even the same with a different twist on other ideas that are happening in the marketplace, right? And then it has sustainability. When I build companies, I sell them typically in about 3 to 5 years, which is fast, right? But the reason why I do that is because the longer you hold on to a company, the longer you risk somebody else doing what you're doing. And investors want a return on their investment, CAGR, right? They want a time, cost, investment, return. So it's, again, going back to understanding when, why, and who, and how much you're going to sell your startup to an acquirer for is fundamental to make sure you get past that. You know what I mean? To get past that initial hike, right? That hardship. And I'm telling you, I have snuck into restaurants to eat food. I have went to garage sales, bought stuff that people were giving away, refinished it, and sold it just to make sure I can eat while I built my startup. And I can tell you that after you do your first one or two, I mean, it gets easier. It's not as hard as it's not as hard. But when you're getting ready to talk to investors, showing them that you understand how company, how the startup life cycle works, and that you have an exit strategy, and that you understand the fundamentals of like when you're going to need money, and planning for what we call death valley. They call it the valley of death. But there isn't just one valley of death. There's a valley of death after every round and before the next one, right? Like you're always in a valley of death until you get to profitability. So being able to prove to investors that you can get, and that you're tracking your percent to profitability, is something that's also going to help you raise capital.
Yes, I mean these are very, very essentials. Very, but like very, very important. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's a question I wanted to ask Mr. Shepard here. So there's two dynamics that go on with Africa that haven't been sort of intuitively solved, right? One of them is so you talk a lot about exits, and the dynamic with the US markets or global markets and Africa couldn't be more different, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So that's one of the areas that even for founders, right? Trying to understand, and I know it's not necessarily your question to answer, but it's still something that I'm curious about, which is how, from the perspective of an African founder, what are the exit strategies that will make whether it's capital providers, investors, public markets, or a company that is abroad, acquire an African company, right? So, and again, just to show you that I was listening, you mentioned that companies typically buy another company to increase the lifetime value of their own existing customers, right? Buy what you do, but then add it to my own existing users so that their lifetime value goes up, and then paying something that is making sure that what I pay for it is worth it. But I want you to be a little bit more explicit, because embedded in that conversation is really an argument for the type of startups African founders should prioritize if they want to exit, if they want to make the exit conversation easier. You see where I'm going with that? So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think, well, first of all, let's break down this concept, okay? If you go into a store, the cost to get you in that store is the same whether you buy one thing or 100 things. Do you see what I mean? So when a company buys your company, they're trying to get more products on the shelf because the cost to get a customer is the same. So the more they buy increases lifetime value, right? So that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is that valuations for companies vary depending on the market, and they adjust to that particular market. So as an example, Canada, if you value a company in Canada at 2 million, that exact same company in the US would be 10 million. And that exact same company in like the Central or South America might be 500,000. So if you're an investor from the outside investing into the market, you're getting that arbitrage, you're getting the difference, right? Because from your perspective, you're investing $500,000 to get a company that you would normally buy for 10 million. So you get more of the company for less money, and the valuation stays low. So it's easier to sell the company to an acquirer because they experience the same thing as an investor, right? They buy a company for 10 million instead of 50 million. So when you think about it that way, the United States and Europe and Israel and some of the other countries that have high valuations, that's not a benefit. That's actually a headwind, because you're fighting against other markets that have the same companies for way, way less money. So if you're a founder in any of the countries in Africa, from my perspective, you should be thinking about raising money from external investors, because those investors are getting a really good deal on it, right? What I'm noticing in the market is more and more investors are starting to leave these more expensive markets and go to external markets where they can get the same stuff for a better price. And same thing with the acquirers. Like people are, they see this now and they understand it, because what they used to be is that they thought, well, some of these more emerging markets, right? They thought, well, how could they build a company as good as this? What they've learned now is they absolutely can build companies as good as other markets, and in a lot of cases better, and that they're addressing problems that other markets just don't have. To your point about how different Africa is from, North America, Central and South America, or Europe, is that you have different problems to address. And those are problems that may not exist anywhere else, meaning they're opportunities that don't exist anywhere else. They only exist in that market. So not only is there a tailwind that pushes you because the valuations are lower, but on top of that, you have a tailwind that's pushing you forward because you're addressing opportunities that don't exist anywhere else, right? So if you're an investor, you can make an investment into a company that's a fintech company in one country and the same investment in a different company. You're not competing. They're completely separate opportunities because they're addressing things differently, right? So the dynamics of working in emerging markets is, I got to tell you, I think that if I had started over, I would be in Africa. I'd be doing this in Africa. I think that's
not too late, Gregory. It's not too late.
It's not too late.
Yeah. I mean, like, really, it's like a real, it's like a really beautiful thing. The other thing I want to mention is that if you think about founders and you think about, there are 5 pieces to the ecosystem. Okay. There are the founders, there are the accelerators, there are the investors, there's the mentors, and there's the providers. The providers are the lawyers and the accountants and the software and the people that are trying to sell things to the founders. That is the ecosystem, right? Is those 5 pieces. When you're in an emerging market, some of those pieces aren't even fully developed, which means that there are startups doing business with startups. So you have that additional tailwind where you're helping each other, right? Helping each other grow. And then the other piece that's really important is that in that ecosystem, everybody always thinks that the investors are the most important piece. And this is what I want to explain. I like to go to the desert. And when you see the desert and you see a strip of green, what does that tell you? It says there's water, right? And everything grows around water. The founders are water. You entrepreneurs are the water. The ecosystem doesn't exist without founders. It only exists because of founders, right? So that's a very important thing to remember. And then add on this piece. In most markets, it's between 80 and 90% of new job growth and new economic development that comes out of startups, because they're engaging in all 5 of that ecosystem. They're doing business with each other, they're doing business with other people, and it's growing the overall market. So if you go into an emerging market like what you see in Africa, it's all upside, right? It's like all opportunity, so it's really a great place to build a company. I would highly suggest that. And then just one more thing. I'm sorry. I just want to say one more thing. There is a organic, if you look at nature and you see how the plants and the animals work together in synergy. When you think about building a startup, you build a startup, it sells to a company. That company doesn't do very good innovation. That's why they buy it. Most corporations buy innovation because they're terrible at it. So they buy that innovation. By the time they buy that innovation and integrate it, it's already old, and then they got to buy a new one. So what you see here is you see this rotation, right? You see this rotation of startups going to corporates and corporates buying new startups. And innovation is like nature in that it's always evolving and there are seasons,
Yeah. So I'm going to watch this part because it's recorded. I'm going to watch it over and over again. A whole lot to learn. So I love conversations to give birth to action eventually. And I'm very optimistic that if um, Greg would be interested, would have a few things to do together as regards founders down here in Africa, and see how well we can key into your network, and as well see how we can attract you to be involved in growing founders over here. Of course, we have very successful or well-formed founders who have attained some good level of success, like Risevest and his peers, right? So my point is, hopefully we'll get to that conversation in a bit. But then I want to first ask two questions: one to Risevest, one to you. Now, as it pertains to building startups, down here, we always have the function called the government. So I don't know how. So of course, I know the business world abroad is way more advanced and way more stable, and it seems to be the business world is even more intimidating than the government. Not totally, because the government still have, they are still the government, right? But then but here people heavily lean on the government. I'll give an instance. That particular event that we hosted was the largest event in Africa, and which Risevest was one of the heavy sponsors we had. So the ecosystem organized that in partnership with the government, but it seems to be, if you don't lean on the government or have the government identify with it, it doesn't carry that weight. But over there in the Western world, alone, once there's some founders you just mentioned, and phew, everybody's just interested. It's just exciting already, because you're well formed. So to navigate through this function, or almost like a bottleneck of succeeding, even with the odds of probably bad governance or not even having the government put a hand in it and so on. Like how, I guess the question will be, how do you advise best we get more stable, being successful in building our communities, founders communities or startups being successful without being a function of the government, even if the government is non-existent and so on, citing what you guys have over there?
I think that I can tell you this, is that in my experience with government, they're after one thing, which is power, right? So control, right? It doesn't matter where in the world you are, they're all the same.
Yes.
They get that from financial impact, right? So if you are contributing to that, the government's going to be on your side. So if you are able to convince the government that you are contributing to something that is giving them financial power, meaning more jobs, more money moving in, more gross domestic product, selling in and outside of your country, like stuff like that, right? Bringing in financial investment dollars from other countries, things like that, that grow the pie instead of slice it up more, but grow the overall size of the pie, then you have a much easier time working. The government's going to be on your side, right?
Yeah.
If you're pulling from the government, then they're not on your side. But
yes.
Right? And all around the world, what you see this idea of there's a waterfall, right? You have the government up here, and then they rain down, and then that rain then showers eventually down to the startups. And so the government can help the startups. But if you can create ways by using investors and other things outside of grants, then, and you're not impacting that, then you can go to the government and say, not only did I not use your money, but I'm contributing. I'm contributing jobs. I'm contributing more money coming in from other countries into the country, et cetera, then what I've seen in the world is, and this is like, we have people running on our software in Pakistan and Israel and all over the world, right? And some of these markets are, way farther behind Africa. Some of the places in the Middle East and stuff that just went through devastating wars are in they're in a whole different area. But what we've seen is that when they're contributing to the economy and not pulling from the economy, the government will usually give them money without them asking because they've already proven that they're contributing.
Right. Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. So yeah, still having that conversation on, I wanted to ask another question to Eke. So we know down here in Nigeria we have, so what like you said, with the valuation of a company in US, the same company value, the valuation in Canada will be different, different in some other area, different in Africa.
Yeah.
So the same vein, when you say an early stage startup in America, the our own early stage is too early, meaning is like ground zero here is not ground zero there. And the level of hype that the US has on networking or connections, this is play a whole lot of role. So some down here is almost not non-existent, but it's even at the barest minimum, especially in Southeast Nigeria. So what is the fastest route? So that I don't mean it has to be very fast, right? What's the fastest route? This is to Eke. What's the fastest route for the early stage, really, really early stage founders operating in Southeast Nigeria to grow from that early stage to at least being a thriving startup, so that we tend to have, when you mention African startups or founders that are really thriving or are successful, we can point a majority of the numbers here from Southeast Nigeria. What routes do you think would be the most feasible route for really pretty very this is not like normal start, I mean really early stage founders that are not from rich background, obviously.
Yeah. Again, so I think that's a great question. The answer is simple, but I think it's also a bit counterintuitive, right? So I've seen a lot of people in the last 3 months. I've spoken to a lot of founders who ordinarily would be doing way more than what they're doing right now. But the problem is that they're either doing the wrong thing or they're doing the right thing the wrong way, right? So let me
Yeah.
give you let me give you a handful of examples. I've seen a couple people who are trying to build the TikTok of this, right? Or something that copies the Jumia of that. But it's like, one, the ideas are derivative, right? And I think it's because they uh, they are building based on, it's almost like received information. You're seeing, oh, that's what these people are doing over there, and that's what investors are giving them money, and therefore that must be the right thing to build, right? And that's completely the wrong thing to build. If you want to build in a way that from an early stage you would thrive and get there quicker, go back to what problem are you solving and how many people are you solving it for. And I find that a lot of the early stage founders that I've met, like you said, in the Southeast, they don't see the problems in front of them as worth solving or worth building for. So I let me give you an example. You don't need any more fintech ideas, except you really have a very, very strong angle or a strong direction that has not been explored, where the market is also very big. I don't know how many of those exist, right? But the truth of the matter is there are other problems. So the biggest SME product today, the biggest SME startup is Money Point, right? But there are people in the Southeast who have engaged with Southeast has probably the largest SME culture, and nobody cared to sit down and ask them, what problems are you having that we can solve for you? I mean, like founders that live in the Southeast, they will pass on each markets every day. They will build the TikTok of food delivery, right? No shade if someone is doing that, but they will build like something that is a copied idea, the Uber for church. Like you're building an idea that doesn't have roots in where you live, right? Nobody has built, every day we complain about police and the checkpoints and what they're doing on the streets. The reason, what's this guy that got acquired by Google Maps? Waze. One of the reasons Google Maps was already there, Apple Maps was already there, Waze built a way that when you get pulled over, they'll tell you that there's police around these areas. So as you're driving up there, any other drivers coming up will get informed that, oh, there's a police patrol car somewhere. So you know to slow down. Or, there's a wreckage on this road. So you know to take another route. Basic problem. That's when Google Maps just acquired them, because we don't have to rebuild that. Nobody has built the application that says, oh, there's police checkpoints here, they're disturbing here, there's an accident here. But everyone deals with those problems. No one has said, you know what, in cities like Enugu or Owerri or Port Harcourt that is too big for Bolt and Uber to come in, why don't you build the code base to build a ride share startup has been open since 2015. Like, you can hack one together in an afternoon. You put a good brand on it, you deploy it. There are innovative ways to create, like, there's two models I've seen, where one is like what InDrive is doing, where, okay, you set a price and people bid and accept the ride. Or another one is you have a flat fee and very fixed locations or fixed routes that you just pay for. You get a ride for the major traffic areas. Let's say you don't want to build for the whole city, but there are major traffic areas. Okay, if I'm here, I can request a ride and pay a flat, say, 2,000 naira, and it will take me anywhere within this axis, right? That's what Birmingham On Demand does in the US. Or you can just do what Bolt does, but you're smaller, so you can do it in a smaller market. And tomorrow, you know that eventually Bolt will want to come to your market. And if you do it really well, it becomes a question of, should we just extend or should we acquire, right? But there are so many different things that if people sat down and say, why am I building this, right? It goes back to what Gregory is saying. Like, from the get-go, you need to understand why you're building something, the value that it creates. Like, what value am I creating by building this, either for my customers, for a potential acquirer, for the ecosystem in general? Like, I believe most business ideas are either saving you money, helping you make money, or sort of providing some level of convenience. But if you don't improve people's life in a significant way, then what you're building, it will struggle to gain traction, because you're not really you're not looking at a problem and saying, oh, XYZ number of people have this problem, so let me go solve it. The last thing I'll say in this regard is, I've also met a lot of people that, in my opinion, are just not ambitious enough in terms of the things they build. And I'll tell you that it takes almost the same level of effort solving big problems as solving small ones. So today, if I'm starting a company, or if I meet a founder, there's a founder that I met, and I asked him, what gets you to $1 million in revenue? And he had never asked himself that question. Like, and to me, it's like $1 million in revenue is like the sort of, for me, the floor of, this is a viable venture style business, right? So if you're starting a company and you look at what you're building, then ask yourself, what do I need to do to get to $1 million in revenue? And then by the time I get to $1 million in revenue, how big is the market? How much bigger is that market in front of me? If the answer is I don't know, or it's not very big, you should probably reconsider, right? But if you have a clear answer, so I do XYZ, this is what I'll do to get $1 million. Whatever you do to get $1 million, you can do it to get to 10, right? So you then ask yourself, what I consider Elon Musk's favorite question, which is, okay, if this is what I want to do to get to $1 million, or this is what I want to do to get to $10 million, whatever your own threshold is, right? Then you list out everything that needs to happen for you to get to that. And then you ask yourself, how can I do everything on this list in 6 months? That's my own, that was it. That's how can I do everything on this list in 6 months? Because, it's not easy. And there are several things. Like, for me, I know the number we had for our 5-year target when I started Rise. I had a 5-year target that I am currently just 20% into that target. I didn't even come close to half of the target, right? But if Nigeria's exchange rate had been stable throughout the last 5 years, if we had stayed at the same exchange rate when I started, I would have been 50% closer to my target. Like, so I would have still been halfway there, but not 20%. But at the end of the day, those things, that part was out of my control, right? So I'm just saying that many people would get bigger much quicker as founders if they focused on, can we solve a problem that we understand, not just something that looks shiny but a problem we understand. Secondly, can we try and answer the question for how big is that opportunity? How many people have this problem, right? And then if I solve it, how quickly can I get to this amount of revenue? And then if these are the things I need to do to get to this amount of revenue, can I compress all of that into a much shorter timeline? So those are the variables that, for me, anybody starting a company should be able to answer so that they can build something that is that has a lot more strength to it. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, thanks a million. I mean, I also have one more question, and I think I'll just have to mute, and we have our Q&A. We'll have Greg, after the response, give a final word, and I'll have a Q&A. I want to maintain the time of 1 hour 30 minutes. But I wanted to, before that question, I wanted to emphasize the aspect of hype. So, for instance, we had someone who was building a company called Savago and One Stack. He's a friend, in fact. He sold either of those companies. I think it was Savago, right? So Savago is basically, it's a good one. What they were doing was basically, a hosting platform, right? Web hosting platform. And so they kept building and kept trying to build. They later sold that company for less than 100. I'm not even sure I'm supposed to be saying, but it's less than 100K. I think it's a public information. And then went to do other things. That company, if it was in Lagos, they would have utilized the network Lagos had, built hype, and then maybe sold that company 10x that amount of money they sold it for. So that so I understand, of course, definitely, the concept of entrepreneurship is problem solving. Full stop, and you have to be customer addicted. You have to first of all focus on the customer and then build backwards. Not necessarily build a business, and then it has to attend to the needs of people around you, and then it has to be scalable. Sure, but I'm just saying that if you tick all those boxes, and you are building for Southeast Nigeria, it seems to be, if you were alternative building in Lagos, you would have access. You have access to network that will give you more hype, and then when you want to probably bring in an investor, your valuation will be higher, or even to exit. It seems to be that down here there is this absence of the relevant hype, that makes it happen the way it should happen in comparison what we have in Lagos. And then, of course, Greg has talked about it. So I'm just thinking, is it also a function of we building the network we're supposed to build? For instance, the accelerator component that Greg had mentioned, or what is it? I don't know if the question makes sense to you, Eke.
Yes, it does. And I don't know if I can speak authoritatively on that. Being that I've built in Lagos, right? And so in this case, even though I'm from the Southeast, when it comes to building a startup from the Southeast, I'm still sort of an outsider looking in, right? But I'll tell you what, for me, what matters, right? I've found that hype is not really, it's a vanity metric, right? It's not it's neither here nor there. It's not bad. It's not good, but not that it's not good. It's to me, it's almost like it's neutral. It helps you in some contexts, but it's really only valuable when you have the numbers to match it, right? So again, I was talking about this even in my post that I'll publish later. That's a lot of people in the startup ecosystem in the East don't take media very seriously, and that's necessary because so someone like the popular valuations professor Aswad Damodaran, he talks about the fact that when you're valuing a company, right, your value it's both story and numbers, right? So it's both of them, and they both feed off each other. So if you're doing great numbers and you're also able to tell a great story, it all improves or increases the valuation of your business. So yes, in that sense, there is value in embracing media, improving storytelling, improving visibility, improving PR. But I think the fundamentals are more important. Again, this might be my bias, right? But I feel like the fundamentals are more important, which is if you understand your market, so you're building a hosting company, okay. So your market is not limited to the Southeast, right? And if you can demonstrate through your numbers that your product is actually fundamentally better, right? And this is something that maybe it ties back to how to build an investment ready startup. Invest investments or an investor wants to see typically a 10x outcome, typically, right? And Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm
Right
investing,
on. That's exactly,
exactly.
yeah.
So that means that if I'm investing in you at $10,000 valuation, I expect to exit at minimum 100K, right? But that means that the market must rate your product 10 times better than the alternative. So you like it's that rule of 10x, in my opinion. Again, if your product is 10 times better, so you're building a hosting company, if you have a hosting service that is 10 times better than anything else out there, customers will flock to you like from wherever, because hosting is hosting. You just need to, it becomes a matter of do you have enough capacity to serve them? And when investors see that, when those numbers are in front of them, there might be a slight haircut, like the same thing that Greg said about U.S. companies valued higher than Canada, which is valued higher than Central America. It's probably possible that you also see a Lagos company that because it's serving a larger market or it's more visible or whatever else, it's going to have a bigger valuation than one in the southeast, right? But the truth is that if I see some really strong numbers, right, and there's no reason a company in Enugu cannot serve the whole nation just like a company in Lagos. So if you do some really strong numbers, then ultimately investors will they'll give you a valuation that makes sense, right? So most of the time I find that when people are talking about these things, the problem is really more fundamental than just, oh, it's because there's no narrative, there's no hype, there's no attention. To me, it's like there's a lot more that you need that you've not done. The last thing I'll say with regards to this is on the internet, so there's something I tell people that, and it's an argument against thinking, well, we're building for the southeast, so you just focus on that narrow sense. If I have a barber, so right now I know I need a haircut. I have a barber shop that is like 15 minutes from my house. There's probably another one that is 30 minutes. The guys that are 30, this is a real life scenario. The guys that are 30 minutes away are legitimately better than the ones that are 15 minutes away. They are so much better. But 70% of the time I go to the one 15 minutes away because I don't feel like driving that much. And I'm just gonna sit at home anyway. So I just go to the one closer to me, right? So in the physical world, proximity helps you capture a certain market, right? But when you're building startups, especially on the internet, then if that barber is much better than this one, everybody will go there. If you have a product on the internet that is 10 times better than any of the alternative, I don't have to, there's no two, that's what everybody will use. So I feel like there is a sense where, so money points now, if you go to Onitsha, I bet you people in Onitsha are using money points, right? I bet you people in Aba are using, people in my village which is a rural area. They are using money, but they've never met the founder. They don't know who he is. OPay is built by some Chinese guy. Half of the team for OPay have never set foot in Nigeria. But why do people use OPay? Because it's so much better than the alternative. And that's what builds their distribution. Why is everyone using money points? They looked at the same thing that made OPay click. And you and I know this. They copied the exact same thing. Fastest settlement. I know it. I've been using them. I've known Team Apps since when they had no hype, right? Nobody was hyping Team Apps then. That's Money Points. That's their name. They were building a product, a settlement product that works just like Flutterwave. Nobody was hyping them. They were not raising all the money that everyone is talking about. They were just there building. But they kept building. They kept fine-tuning. Their product kept getting better. And until a certain point, it was so good that the adoption curve went crazy. And then they raised $110 million at $1 billion valuation a couple years ago. Now everyone's talking about them, right? So I feel like when people have that conversation about hype, they've not solved the more fundamental problem of quality execution, getting the right numbers, building the right distribution. Because if you do all those things, investors will come to you. As long as customers are coming to you, investors will follow. And when customers and investors are coming to you, the hype will always follow it. So I feel like that's my contribution to that. Again,
Right.
but that's what I think.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree with you. Actually, AK, you are incredibly smart. You're incredibly smart, and you obviously know what you're doing. Any investor, yeah, I mean, anybody that invests in you is definitely going to win. We call it success theater hype, right? So basically, how much of that hype is real and how much of it is just theater, right? Where they're just making it. The mistake that does is that most investors, not all, okay, but most investors that are strategic, meaning they look for acquisition, they look for things to invest in. You have the two types. You have the type that do what we call spray and pray, right? So they just throw their money all over the place and then they see what is going to work. You don't want those investors because they don't care about you. And then you have strategic investors who are focused on what we call inch wide, mile deep. So if the opportunity is an inch wide, it means that people are going over to it because everybody's going to the ones that are a mile wide and an inch deep. And the more hype happens, the bigger that gets and the shallower it gets because of competition. So when I talk to people and they go, what, we should do all this hype stuff. I'm like, no, you should not until you are in a position to dominate the market. Because if you think about it, if I'm walking through the jungle and I'm slashing down plants and stuff, and I'm the first mover, that's going to take a long time, right? I'm going to be sitting there and the guy behind me is just going to run right up behind me. So if you're out there saying, hey, look at me, and you're the one on the front and the next mover comes right up behind you, you just set yourself up for failure, right? Like you're going to get your ass kicked, basically, So I always tell people, I'm like, be careful because sometimes the advantage is the opposite of hype. It's inch wide, mile deep. And sometimes hype actually gets you on everybody's radar and everybody's like, oh, that's a good idea. And you can tell because if you look back in history, right now, the hype is all about AI, right? And people are like, I'm an AI company. AI, there is no such thing as an AI company. There are AI-enabled companies, but there's no such thing as an AI company. It's just something you use, right? And then before that, you had the Internet of Things, and then big data, and then analytics, and there's always something, right? And those hype cycles create heavy competition. So I always try to stay away from those things. And I look for things that I'm not hearing about, weird stuff, right? Things that are solving real problems that, like one of my investments is a wastewater treatment plant. Basically they treat shit water, right? To make it so that you can process more wastewater with less water and not having to keep building it out, right? That's like an inch wide, mile deep. Like nobody, it's not sexy, right? Like it's just not. So those are the things that I like to focus on. I try to steer away from hype. because I think it's sort of like putting a target on your back. You know, it's like, hey, look at me, I'm doing all kind, and then every entrepreneur is like coming up on you. You know, it's like, for me, I'm like, no way, I don't want that. I want as little people to know about me as possible until I have my market position. Once I own the market, then I can do some hype.
Right. That makes a whole lot of sense, of course. Okay, so the final question from me would be, so what are your interests currently as an entrepreneur? Bruno shared with me that you have a book. Of course, I've seen it. I will definitely want to purchase it. And then so I wanted to know a bit more about the book. Then know what your interests are currently as an entrepreneur who has done great stuff, and then know your interests currently as an investor. Yeah, so basically that's the final question from me. And then, I mean, we have Benedict, who also has a question too.
Right now, as far as an investor, right now, I'm investing in things and acquiring things that I think will help startup science. So, I've made 2 acquisitions this year to try to buy companies that I think are going to help founders. So if anybody that's listening has a product that helps founders, then those are the ones I'm interested in right now. And anything that is going to help our environment, right? Because we're all the same, right? We all have the same hardware. We just have different software, right? And software is something you create yourself. Your brain, you create your own software. And we all share this little planet together. Like, we're all brothers and sisters on this little planet. And so I invest in things that are going to help our planet be better in the future for our children and our children's children, and so on and so forth. In terms of my focus, my focus is 100% on helping founders, and not just helping founders in any certain market, but all markets. Because sometimes you have people that create ideas in other countries that change the world. So it's not the beautiful thing. One of the most beautiful things about entrepreneurship is that there are no borders. There are no politics. We are all working together to try to make the world a better place. And it makes the first real global market outside of big corporations doing, the stuff they do in politics or whatever. Startups are people working with other people to do really hard things. And if you're doing a startup, whether you know it or not, everybody on this call is your brother or sister, because we are all doing the same thing and we are all feeling the same pain. You know what I mean? So,
Facts.
Right. So, okay. So, would you want to speak a bit about your book?
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that part. Sorry. So I started the book, and it took me 5 years of research, and then it took me 4 years to write the book. What it does is it walks through one of the fundamental reasons why founders fail, which is understanding the life cycle. So understanding, when you're building a company, you need to know 2 things. You need to know where you are and where you're going, just like a GPS, right? If you don't know those 2 things, you don't have your bearings. You can't figure out where you are in this process. So what I wanted to do with this first book was to write a book that taught people the life cycle, what happens, what to expect, and what you're going to go through before you get started. How are you going to prepare for building a business if you know nothing? Like, that is it's no wonder that so many people fail, because anytime you do anything the first time, you're going to go through failures, right? Because you've never done it before. So what I was trying to do is write a book that gave people some idea to try to reduce the number of founders that fail initially because they don't know what's coming, and where they are in the life cycle and how far they have to go, and why other founders are failing, so that they understand how to avoid, those pits, So when I was doing the initial research, I was stuck. It was like heartbreaking, because I was looking at all this data And I was just seeing these founders failing for the same reasons, the same reasons, all over the earth, right? And it's the only industry that I've ever seen that accepts that level of failure for 35 years. Like, there's no other industry that accepts that. So I wanted to do something about it. So I studied it and I wrote the book, and I'm working on my second book. It'll come out next year. It's on funding and capital. So it's on this conversation. And the whole concept of it was to try to help founders understand where they are, where they're going, what they need to know, why other people are failing, why people are successful. You know, it's basically like as if we were having this conversation. It's real easy to read. There is no bullshit in there. It's like just facts, you know, that gets through it. And, you know, it was made for anybody to read, right? I don't read very well. I read terrible, like a child. Like I'm just ridiculous. And I can read the book. So if I can read it, believe me, you guys can read it. And you can get it on an audiobook too, if you want.
All right, that's perfect. Okay, so we have Patrick Aswama on the call, but then I want to ask my final question to Sir Eke. Eke, I don't know, what would you be interested in? No, let me put it this way. So Eke, I think we can work together on something to keep tab or keep contact with Greg and see how we can work together, and then see to what extent that we can have some partnership and expose the ecosystem founders over this area to what this massive worth of experience. I almost wanted to ask him how does it feel to be worth over hundreds of millions of dollars, but I guess I just leave that question there. But then, of course, to expose founders to such huge value, and then see to what degree we can have a great partnership to build founders over here. I don't know what Eke thinks about it.
Yeah. So first of all, Greg, again, it's a huge honor because
thanks, AK. It's my honor. It's my
the
honor.
knowledge. I mean, I can tell you for free. I have like maybe 2-3 pages of notes, right?
Oh, cool.
I've not exited yet, so I'm still very much a learner, right? So what I've done is maybe contribute some Nigerian perspective, but I'm still very much a learner. So I just opened the book on Amazon. It's about $15. I'm gonna buy 5 copies of it. Udoka, to answer your question, I'm gonna buy 5 copies of it. We're gonna give some to people in your ecosystem, right? So we'll talk about how to give, because I feel like once you get the book, at least we've gotten half of the knowledge that Greg has shared here. We'll get it from that book, and when the next book comes out, we'll get another one, right? That's one. Secondly, I've picked up on the fact that, so again, for those of you who are salespeople in the room, don't sell the person your problem, right? You want Greg to come in and do whatever, right? Greg has already said, I'm acquiring companies that help founders, right? So I'm gonna reach out to you, Greg, if that's all right, to find out what kind of help the startups you have currently need. Because I know one of the ones that we will come to you shortly is with Talent Factory. We have like some developers that I know I can vouch for. And the reason we started Talent Factory is that there were a lot of training programs for software developers, but they weren't as good as they needed to be, right? Even for me, again, having done YC, having done Techstars, I want engineers or software developers to operate at a certain level, and they weren't. So we had to build our own pipeline, right? But that's also helping startups because we did this because the problem we will have now is that talent is few in Africa, good developers, and a lot of foreign companies are starting to hire the good ones, right? So we that are building here, we can't compete with that. So by building our own pipeline, we have a steady supply of developers that we can afford to build with, right? So I'm sure there are companies that you have within Startup Sciences ecosystem that will want to work with developers that are good but are affordable, right? It's always a need across the board. So that will be one of the things we'll talk about. And then I don't know where in the US are you based, because I'm happy to like maybe come around, maybe grab a coffee and just explore like what else we could do, to so that hopefully some of the companies that I'm gonna go back and tell Udoka, these are the guys we need to find so that they will actually help your community. So I don't know if is that something you're okay with, and then where do you stay? After that, I guess the audience can ask questions.
Yeah. So a couple things. The first thing is that we're always still. I'm learning too. My mom used to tell me. She said, "If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room." So I always tell myself, that I can learn from everybody. You really can. There's no room for arrogance in entrepreneurship.
True.
It doesn't exist. Um, in terms of like the us, I would love to work with you guys, and you don't have to come here. I can come to you. Because I mean, Africa is an amazing place. I would love to come there. We can do an event and all kinds of stuff. Um, in terms of the types of companies, and in terms of your engineers, so everybody is looking for engineering talent. And inside of Startup Science, there's a marketplace where you can list people and companies that are doing engineering, and that shows up for the whole world, right? It's a place specifically meant to help people that want to work with founders all over the world. I think we have something like 50,000 startups in there right now. So there's a lot of business for people that are engineers, or people that are project managers, or whatever, right? There's, marketing people, everything. There's a lot in there. And more, the world is starting to engage in working with other people in different countries. So it's a beautiful thing. So that's that. In terms of, us working together, man, I would love that. Like, I think that you guys are awesome, and I think it would be amazing to work with you. And I really, really want to get more into the African ecosystem, because, like I said before, I think it's the world's best opportunity region. Like, it just is full of opportunity. And I think that if I can help you guys bring more people into becoming founders, and then help the ones that are founders along, that would be an immense assistance to the growth of the country and the evolution of the planet. So I would love it, and I'll come to you. You don't have to come to me, but I'm in San Diego, California. So that's
Awesome.
great.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm currently in the US. I'm coming out to the West, in towards the end of this month. I'm coming to San Francisco.
Oh,
So
cool.
maybe I'll make a stop. I'll make a stop for sure.
Yeah, that's where I grew up, in San Francisco.
In San Francisco. Where?
Yeah.
In the city?
Yeah, in Oakland.
Oh, that's lovely. That's incredible. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a friend. In fact, whenever I come to San Francisco, I actually stay in Oakland. I have a friend that lives there.
Oakland's
So
cool, man.
yeah,
Oakland's
it's really amazing.
yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, I know people want to ask questions. Don't want to. We're almost out of time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, we're almost out of time. We'll just spend just 5 more minutes or 10 minutes and we'll be done. So, because I don't want to take much of the time of very, very highly revered speakers. But we have Patrick Aswama, who is also one of the heavyweights we have over here, who helps founders. He has um, you know, something to mention to the audience. Hope you don't mind. Patrick, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are currently in the world. Thank you very much, Greg. Thank you, Inzoka. It's really been a wonderful time listening to the both of you speaks. Eke, thank you very much. I guess we actually met in person when I was in Enugu for the Enugu Tech Festival. Sorry, my video will not be up because I'm currently handling a lot of this at the moment. But just to write on the information Rich is actually posted on the group with respect to the UK Africa Trade Expo. we discussed that, okay, let's see how, if there are concerns or questions, but I'll just give a brief recap of what UK Africa Trade Expo is. Africa Trade Expo is a body that is currently based in the UK, who helps to source for funding for African governments, mega projects, startups, and the likes. And the focus for this year and next year is basically on AI. So if you are a startup founder that is incorporating AI into your solution that you are building, definitely there will be a room for you to meet with some high level investors who are willing to invest in startups that are using AI to solve certain solutions, agri-tech. Then at the same time, they're also interested in fintechs, agri-tech, then climate, and the likes of the other one is space projects, but that's basically for government officials. And the event is taking place in London this year by next month, October 24th, precisely. But the time frame is a little bit short for maybe people, interested founders, or individuals that have been interested in going. So that way, the organization has actually teamed up with the British government to ensure that those who are actually interested are granted visas if they don't have a valid visa to enter the UK. So that is basically the information, but it's going to be self-sponsored. For now, the company is not really sponsoring any individual. So if you're interested, what the company can do is just providing you with an invitation letter, and also putting a word to the embassy to ensure that you get your visa before the date and everything. So I don't know if you have questions with respect to that. I am willing to just respond to any of them. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Patrick. So basically, just an opportunity for founders who are actually part of our audience. So hey, it's time for questions. Just two questions and wrap it off. We just after two questions, Greg will give us a final word. Eke will give a final word, and we'll say au revoir, everyone. So yeah, any questions in the house? We have one hand up. That is from Andrew Shidebere. Please shoot. Yeah, Andrew, you have the floor. Please, you can unmute and then you speak. Uh, Chisel, can you help unmute him? Andrew, you have the floor. Andrew Chideberry, you have the floor. Okay, probably he's having a bit of difficulty in unmuting. So while we're waiting for Andrew, do you have any other question from anyone? Okay, we'll have Chibike Benedict. Please unmute.
Yes, good evening. Oh, sorry, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Can you hear me,
Yeah, you need
please?
to be you need to be a bit louder. Sorry, please. Yeah.
Okay. Once again, it's a great pleasure being part of this great meeting. Yeah, my name is Shane HPK Benedict. I'm a software developer and also the founder of Chance Technologies. So we are basically on technological products, which our first product is on validating the authenticity of drugs, if drugs have expired and if drugs are outdated. That is on our first product. And our second product is we are trying to help the visually impaired to learn any digital skill. So my question now goes to Mr. Ake, please. Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. You said you in one of what you were saying, you were like you've not really seen any startup in Enugu State. Yeah, although I'm not based in it, I'm not really based in Enugu State, but presently I'm in the University of Nigeria on Nsukka studying public administration, 300 level. So now with this my product now, how do I get how do I get this? How do I like mainly get the investors? That is
I'm struggling to hear you.
Yeah, you're not
So
so audible. You need to raise your voice a little bit.
okay. Can you hear me now,
better.
Better.
please?
Yes,
Yeah,
better.
better. Yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, so I said with this my product though, because my team are mainly based in this Enugu, although they are mainly students too. So how do I get the investors? How do I get the investors to invest in my products?
Okay. So I want to say a few things, because one is, I never said that I didn't find any startups in Enugu, please. I found several really exciting ones. So you're in Soka, so I'll tell you, I'm sure you know the guys Switch that are doing energy and solar financing.
Yes.
I know you know Green Age. I love what they're doing with solar manufacturing. Obviously, you know that I'm pretty close with Zen Finance, who are building their own um, locally built blockchain. They've been doing stuff with all sorts of crypto integrations, crypto exchange. They've done real world asset integration. And now they are building a blockchain that is native that will definitely is already hosting a few projects, right? So there are definitely interesting things to that are going on out there, right? And that's why, again, the ecosystem is still early, but there's a lot of value. And for me, I also saw a lot of people doing things that they already have the skill, the capacity. If they had better guidance in terms of what they're building, they would move even faster. Now, to answer your question of how do you get investors, so first of all, I want to put it out here. I'm not an investor. I'm a founder. I'm a Series A level founder, which means I'm also looking for investors. So anything I say here is really just my opinion, one founder to another, right? Greg might be able to speak more authoritatively because he's done the full cycle multiple times. But I know one thing: who are your customers, and making sure that your traction is already, there's some level of traction of validation that you have, because your first job as a founder is really not to get investors, is to get customers. And if you get enough customers, you can skip the investor side almost entirely, right? But you want to get investors to either, if it's an idea that requires a lot of R&D, maybe to say build it out. But I would not come in front of an investor without at least an MVP that says, so MVP is minimum viable product, which means this is the base case of this opportunity. And I must demonstrate viability by showing that there's at least customers that are already working with me. So even let me even go back a little bit more. Before we started Rise, we had a Telegram community for people that wanted to invest globally. We kept asking them questions, and we started building our product in response to what they told us. So the customers should always come first, and you validate the demand, and then you build your product. But once you build your product, you get traction, you get paying customers, and then final pieces, if you have all these things, because I'm making allowance for the fact that perhaps you already have all these things, shoot me a message. Udoka has my number. Shoot me a message so that I can look at what you have right now, and then I might be able to say, okay, talk to this person or talk to that person, because most investors respond better with warm introductions. But if you don't want to go that route, events like this, or the Enugu Tech Fest, or any other meetup where people are going to network, show up there, say what you're doing, talk about the value, and hopefully there will be some investors in the room or someone in the room that can introduce you to the right investor. But I'm willing to do that, right? That's how ecosystem, that's what helps every ecosystem that I know. People who have a network, they validate what you're doing, that it makes sense, and they'll tell you, hey, meet this person, they might be able to help. So Udok, I'll reach out to Udok, and then we'll see if there's something there that I can help you do. Thanks.
All right, thanks everyone. So I'd like Greg to say his final words so we can wrap it up for the day. And then we're going to have, we're having, like you said, for our ecosystem is basically organized to some degree. We have people like Eke and other heavyweights helping us around here. That way we call them our senior brothers, because they're doing they've gone some steps ahead of some other founders that we are working with down here. Um, would basically would be having hosting, we're having an accelerator that will give birth to a West Africa event. Hopefully we invite you, Greg. Prior to then, I guess you and Eke will be having some conversations in the US in the meantime. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But we'll be inviting you for that event next year. Before then, you see, we'll share with you a whole lot of stuff of what we're doing down here. See how we can leverage your ecosystem to help the ecosystem we have down here, so they can get on board and benefit from what you've already set up for founders all over the world. So yeah, if we invite you, will you come? And then what are your final words for us here this evening?
I,
Oh, it's evening over here. Then.
yeah, well, I would love to come. First of all,
Oh,
honestly, and also there's 215,000 investors in the Startup Science platform. So,
ooh.
and you can put in your vertical and your region and what round you're trying to raise, and it'll find investors for you to connect to. So
Wow.
just so you know that. In terms of my final words, I always try to tell founders, it's really important to understand that you are the special forces of business. There is nobody better than a founder at business, because it's like if you go through special forces training, only the best survive. That's founders. If you work at some big company, you have a safety net, you're safe, right? If you're a founder, you're embarking on something where, it's high risk, high reward. You have to be a badass business person. So you should be really, really proud of yourself for what you're doing, for one. For two, failure is okay. Everything that succeeds fails first. Think about nature, right? I mean, the plants that survive are the plants that have evolved. And evolution is the process of failure, right? Things evolve because they fail, and then they evolve, and then they fail, and then they evolve. So failure is okay. And struggle is also something that is okay. Like, another analogy of nature, you've seen, a tree growing out of a rock. That tree has struggled to make that happen, but that tree will be here hundreds of years from now, right? The roots are in there. It's part of that structure, versus a tree that grows in soft dirt will blow over when the wind comes. So struggle also is healthy for you. And then finally, I just want to say that I respect and honor every one of you more than I can put into words, because what you're doing is really amazing. And I really appreciate even letting me talk and sharing my experience. Thank you so much to everybody.
Thanks a million, Greg. You're so humble and so kind. We have a whole lot to learn, really. And there is, the Bible put it this way: iron sharpens iron. So it's quite a very huge privilege to be here to learn from you. Everyone in the group, please, if you I'll ask Eke to make his final remark, and then he has to promise us to reach out to Greg. And then when they meet, because the Innovate West Africa we're having next year, we invite him. Prior to then, Eke would have discussed with him, and we'll share a whole lot of stuff like we've discussed here in this meeting. But then in the meantime, if you have any question for Patrick Aswama, who mentioned that opportunity for traveling to the UK for that UK Africa UK program, please drop in the group, drop it in the group, so that we'll attend to you real quick. But then while you're dropping the questions, Eke, over to you, your final words, and also promising us you go meet with Greg, so that the conversation would not just end in this particular call. I mean, you're in the US, right?
Yes. I will, and I will go meet with him, dependent on his schedule. But I definitely want to say thank you as well, Greg. It's been super insightful, and even the resources that you've mentioned on Startup Sciences platform. I am going to sign up. I think anybody that is serious about building definitely needs to go sign up. So thank you so much for making out the time to give us from the experience you've had. And then for everyone else that also joined in this meeting, thank you so much for the engagement. It's a privilege. I really, really appreciate it. And Udoka, thank you to you, to trying to remember his name. Ivan, was it? Ivan?
Yeah,
The person that,
yes.
right. So
Right, Ivan. Yeah, Ivan.
for putting this together as well. So thank you so much, and
Yeah.
I wish everyone success, man. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a very, very insightful evening down here in Africa. Over there it should be afternoon still, right? So this is one thing which where Africa is ahead of the US in time. We're 5 hours ahead. Okay, that was the light. Okay. So we have to say it's been very insightful. Thanks, Greg. And we'll have you a lot to learn from you. I just can't overemphasize on this. And we'll say thanks to Eke, who has been, very, very well available to the ecosystem. We run a large ecosystem down here, and Eke has been very, very available, making sure that he's one of those who put in word for us, who support us when necessary, and also give guidance to very early stage founders who are down here. So, and hopefully we are going to create a marvel, we're going to create magic. It doesn't take, it's a marathon basically, but the much we can, we'll keep achieving our KPIs and so on. So again, thanks to Bruno. Hi Bruno, you still here? Okay, so
he's on mute.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I think we'll draw the curtain here. So, not, we've taken extra 20 minutes from Greg and Eke. So, thanks a whole lot, Saz.
Can I just say to you and thank you to AK, because AK is awesome. So, yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right. So, thanks, everyone. This has been Startup Grind, August. Rather September virtual fireside chat. I know